So there's a continuum of power and control that men use over women.
Across different cultures, if there's a greater strength that men are in charge and have the power, then there's much greater violence against women.
This idea of being stronger than other people, being able to hit the hardest, lift the most,
You're the man. Oh man, you're the man. That's how you do it. The belief in male power reduces his options. It shrinks his choices.
It's just a character, that's all it is. People are not vulnerable enough, they're not open enough.
The more rigid the role is, I'm talking about gender role, the more chances that violence might become a factor.
We need to understand that all of that is deeply problematic and teach men healthy ways of conflict resolution that aren't about exerting influence and control.
So it all starts from a space of inquiry and questioning and not being satisfied with surface level answers and not being satisfied with a sense of status quo. You can't arrive in a different place unless you start asking some different questions.
My old man, who I haven't seen in 10 years now, which is good, but he is a incredibly violent man, black eye, blood nose. He put my mum's head into a corner of a wall, split her head open, That's the that's the character that he is. So I grew up watching that, I have 3 brothers, and it really affected the way that we interact. The main thing that we took away from it was this idea of not backing down.
Some men believe that, and they basically set the law down in the relationship. Man's job is everything outside the house. The woman's job is everything inside the house, which includes cooking, cleaning, and looking after the kids. When a woman doesn't adhere to that gender role of looking after the house, that's usually when he pulls out violence to set her straight.
If you take someone like my father, he felt like he needed to be in control all the time. And I got hidings 3 times a week, My mum got hidings, She lived in terror, She's still working through, after like 10 or 15 years, she's still working through the emotional turmoil that man inflicted on her, What gives him the right to do that? He doesn't have the right to do that.
Men have a continuum from feeling like they can talk more, take up more space, make more decisions, put her down, dismiss her hopes, aspirations, through to controlling her behaviour, through to emotional abuse and physical abuse and sexual abuse. There's a whole range of behaviours that all support violence.
And that was his problem, He had to maintain this character that was given to him, And it was also given to me, but I was just like, nah, I'm not going there, yeah.
Historically, there's a continual escalation. It might start with screaming, and then it goes to pushing, and then it goes to hitting, and then it goes to choking. We're constantly evolving our laws to reflect that. Like strangulation is a particular offence now under family violence laws.
So my real father, I never knew too well. I have witnessed him beat his wife in front of us. Do you want me to tell the story, or?
Yeah, please.
There was me, my older brother, my dad, his wife, and her 2 kids, all crammed into one little car. He got angry at his wife, and she got angry at him, and they were arguing like crazy in the car, and he struck her. And with me and my brother being in the back seat, we started freaking out, and he struck her again and again and again, to the point where it was like, well, she's driving the car, we're going to crash. So she ended up pulling over, and she took my belt off and ripped me out the car and said, I'm taking your son and we're going to the nearest house, and he's going to tell the police everything that happened. And, a shaken up kid, I ran back to the dad and saying, no, I don't, just take us home,
You better put her in her place. She's starting to overstep her bounds. Men that have that type of attitude know deep down inside that if they wanted to set the woman straight, they would have no problems doing it.
I can remember it like it was yesterday, which I don't remember with a lot of things, but that one hit me hard. It hasn't impacted me as a person because I know that I couldn't ever do that. I know that I'd never do that under any circumstances. And it's definitely one of the worst things I've ever witnessed in my life.
I was raised by a really strong woman. I was raised by a really strong woman who had to endure a lot of pain and suffering. I was my mum's rock, so I got to hear her lament, her pain, but also her dreams and her what-ifs and if only. I kind of made a decision within myself that I would never, ever want my wife to ever have to echo anything remotely close to those sentiments.
If men feel like they need to be in charge all the time, a woman who has her own ideas, aspirations, doesn't feel heard, doesn't feel like she's got control over her own life and her situation there.
For me, the traditional gender roles didn't work. So I've been quite intentional about ensuring that my future looks very different to what I came out of.
Men really learn early on from their family of origin about what was manly and what wasn't manly for them to do.
Yeah, my dad was an alcoholic and my mum was a drug addict, and so I sort of grew up in that environment. I couldn't talk to my dad about anything. I couldn't talk to my mum about anything, or I'll just get told to shut up, Like growing up, I learnt my emotions weren't really counted for anything. So I always had to present as harder than I really was. And, yeah.
There's all manner of, behaviours and feelings and thoughts and ideas that young men want to express, but we see time and again that it's okay to be angry, it's okay to be really happy, it's not okay to be sensitive, it's not okay to not be interested in chasing girls. And those sorts of things get continually drilled out of young men, so they get pushed into that box.
For me, I was a really sensitive kid. I took everything personally. I know now that back then I felt a lot of grief and a lot of pain and a lot of fear. Growing up with violence really scared me. My mum and my dad fought a lot when I was growing up, and being really fearful of men, and also being just scared of the whole concept of being a man. And I've struggled with that my whole life up until now, yeah.
A father can build a son's emotional awareness by demonstrating a range of feelings. It could be the fear, the sadness, the anger, but also the love and the affection and the joy, so that the son sees that, and encouraging a son to be expressive of all those feelings too.
Some of the narrative around men are angry, or guys, that's their emotion is to get angry. Well, yeah, that may be our monkey brain, or that may be our natural response, but actually that isn't our only response. And it's possible to react in positive ways and turn, negative thoughts into positive ones and things like that.
And acknowledging that sometimes you'll need some help to express the more difficult emotions. You'll need some words to be able to say that, and space to actually get it out.
Unfortunately, I've seen the worst outcome of unhealthy masculinity and not knowing what to do with anger. And we had a young boy who was 14, and he had a fight with his girlfriend, as 14-year-olds do. But he didn't know what to do with his anger. He didn't know what to do with what came out of that conversation. And unfortunately, the decision he was left with was to take his own life. And sorry. I mean, suicide For me, it speaks to just a real lack of options, and it's desperation. You know, when someone has reached that point in their life, for me, it's just so sad. You know, where were we to support that person at that time?
We raise women to be this way and we raise men to be this way, but actually all of the things that we're teaching both women and men are relevant to both women and men, you know? They're skills that everyone needs. Processing emotions, compassion, empathy, vulnerability.
For some reason, when they get a certain age, it's not cool to be vulnerable. And you gotta put on a mask and you gotta be tough. You can't show everybody that you're hurting inside, that you feel bad and you're not in a good place.
When I was younger, I didn't really know what my emotions were. Both my parents, I can't recall them telling me they ever loved me or anything like that, so I didn't really know how to express love, even though I knew they loved me, but I sort of felt like I was never ever good enough for my dad, so not really emotionally there, never really cried or anything like that, so I sort of looked up to him like he was a tough guy, he never hurt himself, and playing rugby, and he was just a strong man. Yeah. My father never talked about his feelings to me, so I thought it was normal just to just bottle them in and act like everything's okay and just get on with your day, you know, it was never talked about at all.
Men are socialized to, they get to a certain age and now they're expected to keep that stuff inside and project toughness and that I'm okay and I'm bulletproof and everything's going well. Those things contribute to the problems that we have with men being emotionally illiterate.
I learnt how to not be me, really, and I learnt how to be someone I wasn't. It was hard, but it was just how I learnt to grow up.
Talking about feelings and talking about emotions was something growing up that, you know, no one taught you that at school. And if you weren't taught that in the home, then how are we expecting guys to deal with those things in their own lives? Yeah.
I blocked my feelings. You know, I wanted to escape my feelings, my emotions, because I didn't know what they were. I think because I didn't feel good enough for my dad that I really was trying to prove that I was worth it, you know, prove that I was someone, you know, that I was a man, you know.
I think it's really important that we don't encourage young men to be anything in particular. I think it's really vital that we undo a lot of the expectations that we put on young boys and young men to fit a stereotypical model and give them the freedom to be whatever it is that they're naturally inclined to be.
Well, you know, as a young kid, you know, you voice your feelings because you think that's what you think and feel, so you get that out. But when I did that, I would be told to shut up, to go away, and I'd go in my room and I'd cry. I'd hide under my bed and I'd cry.
Gender roles are a social construct, and they're expected to adhere to all those rules. Boy, don't play with dolls, don't cry, I mean, that kind of stuff. So
we kind of seem to value particular life choices for young men and devalue other ones. There's more to being a man than being good with your body, and being a man is being whatever you want it to be. Whatever it is, I think we need to give young men the space to do that. You need to be good with cars and woodwork and engineering and fishing and hunting and that alpha male stuff, you know? Where does it leave all the other boys who don't want to do that sort of stuff?
I cried a lot as a kid, and if I was to cry, then I would sort of get shunned by my friends. Not cool, you know, and that was the sort of stigma I grew up with, yeah. I bottled all my emotions up. I put everything that I felt inside somewhere down deep that I didn't have to look at or deal with, yeah.
Peer crowd behaviour, teasing, making fun of people, you know, calling them names, you know, sending them stupid things on the internet. You know, those are culturally reinforcing behaviours, and we're teaching really negative things quite often.
I started getting bullied, you know, my first year of high school, and so I sort of turned to the people that were bullying me, and I started hanging out with them, and I'd be stealing money off my dad, going to the supermarket before school in the morning and buying like chocolate and lollies and giving it to these people to be like, hey, be my friend, love me, no one else loves me, like that led to drugs. And so 13 I was selling drugs at school, smoking weed every day, taking pills all the time, bunking school.
I think it's really vital that we understand that, well, it's not just a joke when you say someone don't be a girl or harden up. We need to talk to one another and say, yo man, like, why are you teasing him? Why are you giving him a hard time? Like, who cares? Just let him do what he wants to do.
Like, I'd been in trouble with the police quite a lot from about 13 to 16 and in and out of institutions. But at 16 when I found meth, I was like, I thought I'd found home. Like I'd found something finally that made me feel like I was me.
I think society in general tries to put square pegs through round holes, and people have to shave bits off themselves to be, socially accepted. And for young men, that means that they're getting involved in, setting themselves up for failure long term.
I found drugs at a young age, and I just started using, and that was like a blanket for me. I felt comfortable, a way to escape reality, and I continued on that path for over 10 years. Started off with alcohol, then went to weed, ecstasy, and ended up on meth. Daily user of meth, yep.
That only lasted so long until it led me down a really destructive path of going in and out of prison, stealing and robbing, being arrested all the time. I spent my 18th, my 19th and my 20th birthdays in prison. And for a little white boy, prison's not that much fun. And I never had any sense of who I was or what I wanted in life, and I found the drugs gave me that. When I was using drugs, I had people, and that's what I always wanted my whole life, I just wanted to be loved. Yeah.
We hold things in here, we hold on to these emotions. It's a big issue facing Kiwi men today, they are not taught the skills. Part of their humanness is being denied, and that's a massive issue, They're not being taught how to deal with these problems, they're just being taught, get over it, or, I was told that, the amount of times I was told that as a kid, get over it, It limits your ability to express emotions, it limits your ability to engage with people, like other people in romantic or otherwise relationships,
Especially with my most recent relationship, I'd always try to wear the pants, and if I was angry, I'd tell them, I'd, sort of almost control them. Like, you can't go there, you can't do that, in a really aggressive tone, and to get my own way, because, I wouldn't want them going out or like something. I'd definitely reinforce it in an angry way. I'm trying to work on that controlling behaviour. I know when I was heavily in addiction, I was definitely in a crazy mindset, and I didn't know the tools I've learned today in recovery. And so what I am trying to be as a better person, and not be controlling, and just allow people to be free and be who they are, and let them do what they want.
I think we need to be mindful that boys are taking their cues from really misogynistic media, pornography. There's not a lot of talk about kindness or reciprocity or intimacy and where kids get their ideas about what sex is. Like, everyone wants a hug sometimes. Like, your relationships with women aren't just about like hot action.
When I was young, I sort of learnt about sex via movies, pornography on the internet, and I guess through my friends' older siblings talking about it. If you're getting sex when I was a teenager, you're cool. That's how it was, and they'd be either jealous or something like that, or high fives, you're the man.
Then the physicality of pornography, there is an unequal power dynamic. There's no, do you like this? Can I do this? Does this feel good for you? It's all about the dudes. Porno scene ends when all the men have an orgasm, fade to black. What is that teaching young men? What is that teaching boys about how to relate to women?
In my experience of talking about women, there's a lot of disrespect. This girl's a slut, this girl, whatever, and calling girls bitches. That was another one. What that taught me was that sex was like something gold, almost, like something you want to achieve. And obviously being a young boy, it was like, if you have lots of sex, you're cool, you're a player, that's sort of that another ego, and more your worth in the world. Because I was definitely using sex as a feel-good, because I wasn't comfy in my own skin. Yeah.
In the context of relationships and sex, a lot of it is also constructed. Bros before hoes. When you start talking about bros before hoes, you automatically demonized or you put down the woman. It just snowballs after that. You start adding stuff to it, like they become an object and not a person.
It's my experience with sport and some of the undercurrents of sexism or the male dominance narrative. It was actually really difficult to counter that. You don't want to put yourself out there hearing comments or being a part of conversations that just make you feel really uncomfortable, but then also not really knowing what to do about that. And you kind of feel like you're batting for the wrong team. And like, why are you trying to defend a gender? If I look back and I'm really honest, I wish I'd probably been a bit stronger maybe about what I was really thinking in those situations, and that I would encourage my own kids to do is, to step up against those voices that really when you hear them, it doesn't sit right, and that speaking against a whole group of people in that way is actually just wrong.
Quite often, when a guy steps out of those stereotypical notions of what it is to be a man, holds up a mirror to the men around them, and quite often when we have that happen, it makes other people feel uncomfortable. It's much easier to pull the odd one out down and pull them back into the status quo than it is to reflect on your own behaviour and potentially change.
The importance of talking with men and about other women and with respect, that they're humans too, they deserve as much respect as men do, really. We're all equal, that's my view on it.
One of the key things to remember is, in fact, that males and females are 98% the same biologically. The 2% difference tends to be what cultures and societies pick up on and exaggerate to end up with the traditional male roles, traditional female roles. But there is actually a whole lot of commonality, which is what makes us all human and makes us all equal.
The value of equality is that it enables a community, a family, people to come together and have a conversation face to face. One is not above the other. And we need to role model to children or our young people of what that looks like. Promoting the positive aspects of an equal relationship.
One thing my wife and I try and do is really acknowledge each other when we come through the door at the end of the day, so that our kids see, first of all, that our relationship is something that is really fundamental to the way that we live. It's not just mums that have to raise kids, it's dads as well. It's not just dads that have to go to work. Like, mums have passions and things that they want to pursue in their life as well, and so for us to try and role model to our sons that's part of our beliefs and something that we really strive for.
All the talk about male roles, but one of the key dynamics of that is that being masculine is simply proving that you're not feminine. So it's about ensuring that other men see that you're not feminine.
Being violent, being misogynistic, seeing women as an object, that was what it meant to be a man. That was what it meant to be a classic man. That idea of masculinity kind of being enforced by my peers. Because if that's all you know, then that's all you know.
And that's a bit crazy making, because it's not actually developing a positive, definite identity. You're always proving not rather than I am, and always got your eye on getting approval from other people. So that's not a healthy way of living life.
You're talking about maybe peer pressure, or pressure trying to live up to the expectations of your peers.
I guess at school it was like sort of who was the bigger, badder guy, who was the tougher guy, who that feared. I guess you feared the most. They were quite respected. People wanted to hang out with them for protection. And when I was under the influence of alcohol, I'd pick fights at parties and stuff like that, and just yell abuse to people and just sort of try to provoke fights, thinking I was being cool. I want to be the man, and be the bigger man even.
When you grow up abusing alcohol, boasting about all the girls that you slept with, using violence and sporting prowess as a way to get social approval, then you're really limiting yourself.
My friends with me that would pat me on the back, like, oh yeah, you showed him, sort of thing, and yeah, I definitely felt like I was doing something right then. Yeah, I felt like I got a lot of respect. I sort of felt like people were talking about me. I was sort of famous from it, like everyone at school knew who I was, and yeah, I sort of got an ego, definitely a big ego from that. I had a few assault charges and ended up one night being drunk, robbing someone by punching them over, and I got robbery charges for that, which wasn't very good.
You're setting yourself up for failure, because there's going to be a time in your life where you need to be vulnerable and you need to be sensitive and you need to know how to express what's actually going on inside yourself. But we don't really teach young men that as well as we should.
What we want to do is move away from any rigid roles and move to where each individual, be they male, female or other genders, can take on behaviour that they feel is right for them. They're not just doing it because that's what a male does, that's what a female does, they're doing it out of choice.
When you start putting down a different gender, that could actually make it okay for a certain group to bash or perpetrate violence on the other group. So it's almost like you're not a real, whatever that gender is, therefore it's okay to bash you because you're not like one of us.
We need to broaden the term of male, broaden the term of female, because 2017, there's a lot of people that don't identify as either male or female. A friend of mine, within the last week, killed themselves. These gender roles kind of were part of their death, I guess, We enforce these things so firmly that people that are struggling with their identity, they struggle more, If someone says, I don't identify as male or female, why do you have the right to go, why not? It's not really your choice, it doesn't affect your life. Why can't we be more accepting,
We hear about Aotearoa, New Zealand, having one of the highest youth suicide rates. And so, why do people decide that that's the answer, To be flexible around gender can only help support and nurture that young person into exploring and finding out for themselves who they really are. Quit forcing them into a box and allow them to come to that realization on their own, with support.
I mean, we're all human. Male, female, whatever gender one subscribes to, we're all human. And there is this idea, this intrinsic thing in us that to love and care for other people.
There's so much of this culture in this country of drugs, violence, alcohol, gangs, and it's promoted, and it's just promoted in the world in general these days. So it is really hard for a kid growing up to be known that, hey, you're okay, you're worthy, you're loved, it's going to be all right, I love you, regardless of whether you're gay, straight, bi, transgender, we love you anyway. I'll love you, because all I ever wanted was to be loved. I guess really the essence for me is love. It's such a hard thing to try and fix. I don't think it will ever be able to be fixed, but yeah, it's a hard one.
I mean, there's a self-interest for men in accepting flexible gender roles. When men aren't drinking themselves to death because they're swallowing all their emotions all day, every day, they're going to be healthier and happier. If men are allowed to talk about their feelings and be vulnerable, instead of having to put like a front up all the time, they're going to live longer and live happier lives and fuller lives.
I feel like this false idea of masculinity is exactly that. It's a mask, it's a facade, and I believe that deep down inside, these young men also know it. And they know that there's something wrong here, there's something not quite right.
Yeah, I highly recommend talking about how you're feeling. Even if it's bad, if it's happy, just whatever. It just doesn't trap it inside you, and that personally doesn't make my head go crazy.
If the entry point is courage, if the entry point is a sense of duty and responsibility to your fellow brother or sister or whānau or whoever, that becomes the point where you can start having some really good discussion.
I understand that there's a real effed up concept in New Zealand of what a man is meant to look like. For me, being a man is showing your feelings, is being emotional, is fronting up and saying, hey, look, I'm struggling at the moment, I need help. Now that if I actually want to feed my spirit and my soul and live a good, happy life and be happy with who Vinny is, then I actually have to talk about what's going on for me.
Sometimes courage looks like taking little steps rather than one big, massive thing, Being able to confront one's own cowardice about speaking up or standing out. Sometimes courage looks like just shutting down something. Sometimes courage looks like putting a hand on the shoulder of someone who's going through a hard time and being vulnerable.
My hope for the future is that we can change our notions of masculinity and change the behaviours that stem out of those notions. Guys will read those extreme cases of family violence or sexual violence or murder and think, well, that's not me. Most men are good men, but most men perhaps don't actually say that this is bad behaviour, these are bad ideas, and these ideas lead to these things happening. And I want all men to be able to challenge them and change them so that all people and women and girls in our lives don't have to live in fear anymore, because unfortunately they do. It's a fact. And we are all responsible and all have the ability to change that.
Be courageous. Courageous enough to be different. Recognize that you are a part of a bigger thing and you can contribute to it. You kind of already are.
Man, if I have kids, I just want to help them be the best people they can be, regardless of who they end up being or where they want to go in life. I just want to support them to be 100% true to themselves,
Father I want to be for my son is a positive role model for him, an encouraging, supportive person for him, just someone he can come to with anything and just not be afraid and just tell me what's going on for him.
I was never given that opportunity, harden up, stop it, stop crying, you're a pussy, that was the stigma that I was strict with, and I will never put that on my kids, I want to lift my kids up, not push them down,
I think that eventually that macho male character will become uncool. Hopefully sooner rather than later, but what it will involve is all of us contributing to that conversation, all of us being part of that, aware of it, not being afraid to say to your friend, oh, actually, I'm not sure about that thing he said, It's education above everything else, That's my hope, yeah.